You're listening to the Outpost podcast with Dr. Ray Mitch. Well, greetings and welcome, everybody, to another edition of the Outpost podcast. I am Dr. Ray Mitch, your host. Thanks so much for joining me. This is the final report of the Silent Retreat of 2024, and so I have been filing on-location reports, and now I'm back at the Northern Command Post to be able to file a final report. Looking back on the retreat and giving you some observations in regards to that. So, as I've been saying, and this is day number 3, and we tend to close out the retreat. And what I want to try to adjust, wow, I just hit my mic there. What I want to try to address is not only the last evening of our time together, but also the reflections that came on Sunday, which we close out the retreat by reflecting on the weekend, saying to one another the things that we appreciated, that we found courageous, that was remarkable to us, and then we share community together and we call it a wrap. And so we always do a group picture at the end, and that is our group. And so that is what I want to do today, is to give you a little bit of a behind the scenes view of what was going on in this particular retreat and how it all kind of crescendoed, because that's really what it ended up being. Is it crescendoed into our Saturday evening into Sunday morning time together. And I think that's what is ultimately important and worth paying attention to. So let me address the Saturday evening. What we have been seeing as I've been talking through and giving you a bird's eye view of what happens in the retreats, what we have been seeing is we started with some pretty toxic visions of who God was, what his character was, how untrustworthy he was, or he is, at least for the people that were involved. And there were lots of things that were not said, which I think were every bit as important as the things that were. And that's always the case in these retreats, is that people tend to not say them because they are absolutely sure that other people can't possibly relate to it, that other people would actually judge them if they heard what was going through their minds about God. And so that's usually the beginning. That is oftentimes the beginning. Now, concurrent with that was a detoxification period of time, if you will. And we honestly don't realize how saturated and marinated we are in noise and distraction and all the things that kind of take our focus away to other things, whatever they are. Certainly not spiritual things, oftentimes. Social media is a huge siren song, if you will, that draws us to it. And away from considering the landscape of our own hearts and what's going on in it and all the things that go with it. So that was Thursday night and getting accustomed to what this was going to look like. Friday night, things started changing. Not a lot was changing. There was a lot of reaction to it, anger and frustration and false conclusions about life and about themselves and about God and all of that. And again, this movement is a very, very typical one that I have seen in the kinds of things that we do. And so the silent retreat is set up in such a way that it actually has this community component to it, or a group component to it, where we debrief and we share stories of the day, and we talk about the conclusions that we might be making, or the things that we fear, or things like that. And that quite honestly makes what we do very, very unique. Usually most traditions has me talking about it with a spiritual director who is helping me to, kind of choose or pay attention to various aspects of my spiritual journey that I may not be paying attention to, or to do more of. That's also a role of a spiritual director. So to have this community aspect and talking through what is going through in our minds in an open forum is not only intimidating, but I think quite powerful in terms of walking into God's presence with one another and being able to talk about the things that we see and understand and we fear and we've been wounded by and we're angry about. All of those things are very much a part of what is the landscape of our particular way of doing retreats. And I think it's an important one. I think there is a place to meet individually, but I think there's every bit as important a part to sit and talk with one another and to share what life is like from our vantage point, rather than what we should think or how we should do things or what we should feel or any of those sorts of things. And so going into it, the second night was still a lot of tumult, if you will, but it was muted. It was muted. The people were still overly editing most of the things they had to say, and some people said nothing completely, and that also is not terribly uncommon. Because we're still not accustomed to trusting people. I don't really care what people have to say about, well, I trust people, certain people, but even those people, I don't really trust them, not with the things that we feel most threatened by or the most vulnerable about. And so because of that, then we don't try and entrust ourselves to anyone, really. And so that was very much a part of the evening 2 of the debrief groups that we have. Evening 3 is often a major unveiling in a lot of cases for people, because their frustrations are now building up, and they don't know that they had those until things start not happening compared to somebody else in the group or some other people in the group. And so one of the things that I will often say is we don't know we have expectations until they go unmet. And in a lot of cases, we react with anger and frustration and a lot of shame, like dumping on myself to say, what's wrong with me? I can't be a good Christian. They're good Christians. They're doing it the right way. I'm not. And it's little wonder that God only looks the other way when I'm trying to come into his presence, rather than fully embracing me and delighting in my being there with him. And so day 3 or evening 3 is oftentimes a bubbling over, if you will, that people have. And that's exactly what we saw on Saturday night. Is we saw a bubbling over. We had people that were finally making the connections in their heads about what they were missing and the nature of who God was. And maybe, just maybe, he might be trustworthy. He might be loving. He might want us as friends, not slaves. He might want to know the inner workings of our hearts, even though he knows. But the issue isn't whether he knows or not. The issue is whether or not we are willing to articulate what those actual things are. And they don't become real until we speak it out loud with people that there is some measure of risk with. The other thing that I will add to that is that love can't exist without freedom, and love will never exist without risk. That's always part of the landscape of loving and being loved. And that's what oftentimes is embraced and found out about in terms of this silent retreat. And it makes it palpable because it creates this window of opportunity for people to kind of open their hearts for a brief moment, experience something, and say, oh, I never knew that it felt like this. I never knew that it was like this. Now, forget about the fact that we don't take the risk, or we don't try, or we don't have anybody kind of leaning on us to do it. But we had two significant things occur on Saturday night that I think are very connected to one another, but look very different. One person who had already made all the conclusions about their self, and it's not a they, okay, but I'm trying to protect their identity and who they are. But they have already made all the conclusions about themselves in other people's minds. And yet it is a vial of poison that they drink from, because it's their thoughts about themselves that are now attributed to other people. And that's what this is all about. And essentially, the more it's articulated, the more it is said out loud, the more there's a greater opportunity to confront it and to do something different and to think something different. Our thoughts don't change on a dime. They never do. We need time to slowly but surely embrace them for what they are. And so that is very much a part, I think, of the landscape of our change, because change requires trust, and it also requires grace, not only from ourselves, but the grace that is offered us in God that just doesn't happen. In any other religion, grace doesn't exist. It is effort. It is towing the line. It is performance. And if you don't do it, you're a failure. And if you do it, there's always more to do. And so the silent retreat actually is this, I hate to say it this way, but I'll say it, this magical land where a lot of those things tend to get suspended temporarily so that I can experience life in a very different way. And that's what happens there. And it can't, quite honestly, I don't think it can happen anywhere else. Because of all the swirling expectations and hopes and dreams and wishes and agendas and all of that stuff that tends to just interfere with our ability to do life differently and even to think about life differently. And so there's a lot of that goes into it, I think. And so we had one person who actually I challenged to ask people what they saw or what they thought about that person. And the challenge was, I want you to ask them, how do you see me? And there's the first act of trust is that what they're telling you is truthful. Our tendency is that when people tell us things, we think they're being kind and nice and lying. Now, we won't say that to them, but because of their niceness and because of their kindness, they're saying the kindly lie rather than telling us the truth, because, of course, we know what the truth is. We know what the truth is about us, and if they don't say things that are agreeable with that lie, then they're lying to us, not us. And we have tremendous kind of choice to make when we ask people straight up what they think, and when they say, I see someone of courage, I see someone of depth, someone that's worth getting to know. I am ever so grateful that you took the opportunity to let us know you. Those are all messages that go against the lies that are percolating in people's minds oftentimes, and certainly in this person's mind. And they had a challenge. They had an ultimate challenge to decide who might be telling them the truth, and what did the other people have? What vested interest did they have in telling something other than the truth to them? They didn't. They didn't even know them that well. So there's a very important challenge, I think, that exists within that I think we have to pay attention to. And again, like I said, a silent retreat tends to open this window for opportunity to have that. Now, the other instance, if you will, in the group was when somebody said just a little bit about what was going on and then just burst with all the tears. And it was like the dam was breaking of all of this emotion and things that the person was feeling, and to such a degree that they could not speak. Now, what made this particularly palpable to me or important to me, maybe better yet, the word would be poignant, is it seemed as if, to me, in watching the group behave, and I've seen a lot of groups respond to things just like this, but it seemed to me that the group understood that it was holy ground. It was sacred ground, that someone was opening this kind of tabernacle of their heart to other people. And if we were going to proceed, we needed to proceed with a great deal of care and caution. And what was remarkable is, to a person, the group was quiet. They simply entered into that with the person rather than adding words or platitudes or maybe you should consider this, or God isn't that way, or things like that are all well-meaning, but they're misplaced. And I think we have to understand that truth can be very much like a knife. It can either cut or it can heal. And the biggest part of healing oftentimes is not using it, even though I could. And that happened. And that really happened. And the next morning, the person reflected on what happened. And the person said, it would have been so easy for me to disqualify it. And if somebody had spoken up to say something, I would have very easily done that. And nobody did. And then I had to contend with the reality of what I was sharing. And there's something instructive in that allows them the person to grapple with the reality of where they're living rather than where they should be living, which is always a split. There's a split between where I am and where I should be. And the should is a place that I will never arrive at because it is always changing. It is always floating upward because I can't hit that standard. I won't ever hit that standard when it comes right down to it. But living where I'm at, I'm afraid that if I accept the reality of where I'm living, then I will never get out of it. And the reality is, I won't get out of it if I don't accept it. That's the reality. And we miss that point. And in so many ways, we miss that point. So the group moved on, and it was an important group. And it always is. It seems like our third evening is always a pivot point for the group, and in terms of not only intimacy, but also a level of connectedness where somebody walks out and says, I love you guys. I have never had this kind of sense of connection with people ever before. And that's what makes silent retreats, and I'm going to broaden the scope here for a second, but that's what makes silent retreats unusual and remarkable, because it gives us, we move into something voluntarily. We're not made, nobody's holding a gun to our head, to open this window of grace and truth and to learn what it means to live in it. And that's nothing short of miraculous. And I think in that's exactly why the miraculous happens, is when we do that kind of thing. And that's what, I think makes our silent retreats remarkable. And like I said, I don't think you're going to find this anywhere in any university spiritual formation approach at all. It's Christian ones. I'm not talking about secular ones. Secular ones are not all that interested in spiritual formation. They just are interested in the mastery of content. But at CCU, I think part of what makes us unique, particularly in the psych department, is our commitment to not only learning the content of psychology, but developing the spiritual character of our students. And that's still available to people that are maybe not at CCU. But the touch point or the nexus point for that is really a silent retreat and becoming part of that. And so those are the observations. It was a remarkable retreat. I rarely walk away from one saying anything other than that. And I think it's not to make it mundane or it's always the same or uniform. It's never the same, because the mix of people that are part of these retreats, and I am humbled by the privilege of being able to have a front row seat to see God work in the way that he does in these retreats. So now the other bigger need on the backside of these retreats is, where do they go to continue? I had somebody once say or ask on Sunday, it's like, well, what do I do next? I mean, how do I have a retreat in everyday life? Or how do I learn how to connect with people like this? And ultimately, the starting point really is to connect with the people that have been part of your retreat. And that's short-lived. I mean, college is not that long. And even a semester is only 15 weeks. It's not that long. It sounds like an eternity when you're starting it. But here we are 4 weeks out, and we're almost done. And people are now feeling some sense of panic, because it's like, time's running out. And how do I kind of keep this going? Well, that's where, and that's part of the vision of SGI, is the Outpost groups, because Outpost groups are a continuation of what the silent retreat experience was like. And they're led by people that know what they're doing. They're not using it as a platform to propose or to push their own agenda. It is really all about meeting with one another in the presence of God together and experiencing life in a different way. And an outpost, by its very definition, is always on the margins of society. It is not in the middle of it. You have to move somewhere other than where you are to be able to find something like that. And so if you're interested, like I said, fill out the form on the front page of the website at sgi-net.org. We are actively, and I'm actively looking for people to be a part of Outpost groups, no matter where you are. We can start online. That's the beauty of online, is we could have somebody in France and somebody in America and somebody, in Florida. I don't know. I mean, wherever. Not that that's another country. Some people might think it is, but I think that's the key. Ultimately, our goal would be to have you meet in person in a locale where you can continue to do this live in real time with one another. And quite honestly, I think that is part of our efforts to deepen our relationship with God and with people. but it's also, I think, a connection point if or when things get tough in the future for us as Christ followers. So there is that, and we need to be able to find out what the interest is out there of people that are listening to the podcast, to be a part of an Outpost group, and where we can train leaders and be able to send people out to do that, which is based on the very same model that Jesus used. And of course, we need people that are willing to support what we're doing. And I'm not going to beat that drum real hard, but if you're interested and want to be able to do that, then hit the donate button and participate and make this even more possible. Extend our reach and be able to do that. The website has resources for healthy relationships. If you want to buy a book or two about grief, you can do that on the website as well. And ultimately connect with other people while you're there. So when you hit the website, you'll get this pop-up that asks to be part of the community. We send out roughly a newsletter once a month that lets you know what's coming up and the events that are coming up and how you can participate if you're interested. My hope would be that we can do some live events over the summertime when I have a little bit more time, and I'll be grounded because I'm getting a new knee, and so I'll be able to facilitate that. But I would love to be able to see people get together that way as well, to share some of the things that they've learned and the things that they want to learn more of. And there are other things developing in the background that you don't see on SGI that will facilitate this growth and this conversation, if you will, in terms of deepening our relationship with Jesus, and also deepening our relationship with one another. So I think that's pretty much it. If you want to, and I say this every time, if you want to send a physical check, you're more than welcome to do that. You can just simply send it to SGI at P.O. Box 322, East Lake, Colorado 80614, and we would be ever so grateful to do that. And because we've got a freestanding retreat coming up in the middle of May here, coming up real soon. So that makes those possible, and makes it possible for us to share it with people that maybe can't afford the whole price, and it offsets the price a little bit so they can come and be a part of it. So I think that's it for today. Yes, I am here. It is daytime while I'm doing this particular podcast, partly because we've had some significant winds here in Colorado, and I actually got an unexpected day off, so I can sit here in my office during the afternoon and be able to do this podcast. But keep your eyes peeled for a promotion, whether that's on Facebook or Instagram or LinkedIn. Those are the three major places. Or you can always hit the website and go to resources, and under free resources you'll see Outpost Media and the podcast video reel, and also any of the other audios that you might want to listen to. The other thing I'll mention, and I didn't mention it, is that I just started up another podcast, as if I'm not busy enough, but on the collective wisdom of life, living, and sorrow, and it's called Unscripted, and it is slowly but surely populating the platforms that I spoke of in Amazon Music, Google Music, iTunes, and certainly in LinkedIn as well. So, and that's unscripted, as the name implies. I take time out to just talk about the journey through grief, which I am going through, and I wrote about in the book The Seasons of Our Grief, and I am simply walking my way through and talking about it and making observations to help people that are also walking this journey with me that I just started not all that long ago. So that's there. If you're interested, hit it, listen to it, provide a review that increases our visibility for people that might be interested. And that's true for the books as well. My new book, The Seasons of Our Grief. If you like what you read and you appreciate it, write a review, please, on Amazon. That, again, makes it more available to more people that don't know anything about it at all. So, okay, I won't belabor my point, and I will not overstay my welcome. Thanks so much for joining me. I will catch you next time here on the Outpost podcast or in the Outpost. And until then, love ya. Later. Bye.